organizations that are going to use this. The already application is actually a great example of what we want to do with Humanitarian Toolbox, because it's almost recursive, if you will, from a technical point of view. Humanitarian Toolbox is about taking skilled volunteers and having them take those skills and help organizations and individuals who work in disasters and in preparedness by taking that technical skills, turning into software, and having them use it. Same thing is almost true for Already. Already is an application that comes from the idea of how do we take volunteers, the generosity of their times and their skills. It may not be software, it may be the ability to install smoke detectors or the ability to do grief counseling or whatever that is. How do we take volunteers, organize them, get them aligned to the right activities, and get them to be the most effective to help with preparedness? And the focus on preparedness is important because the idea is that an hour or $1 spent before a disaster is worth 30 afterwards. It's like software. Fix a bug earlier, it saves you a lot of time later. And so we know that with preparedness, we can remove the impacts of disasters, we can remove the likelihood of disasters from happening, and we can make everybody sort of that much more ready for when a disaster occurs. So we're focusing in Already around how do we take volunteers, their generosity, and tie it to specific needs. And our first example, although this is just our first customer, we're going to use many, is with the American Red Cross chapter that's out of, or the division that's out of Chicago and covers North Central. And one of their first campaigns they're going to use this for is installing smoke detectors in homes that don't have those already. And the importance there is as you can imagine, if you don't have a smoke detector, you can't be alerted, you can't sort of save yourself. And it feels good to sort of help firefighters who run in after and during a disaster or a fire, but it's even better to help people help themselves and get out of the way of a disaster so that nobody has to be put in harm's way. So what you'll see when you look at the application is a website and a number of use cases that focus on the administrators from those organizations and the end user volunteers, how we advertise how you can help, how we allow you to sign up to volunteer, and then how that organizer can connect folks in the back. And so there's a number of issues that are up there in the repo that are labeled Jump In. You have the ability to kind of help get acquainted with the application, work on it, as well as there's some deeper things. If you want to go in, play with sort of the newest version of ASP.NET, Entity Framework, etc., there's a whole swath of different ways that you can contribute and help. And if you don't happen to be a developer and you're more of a designer or a tester, plenty of things that we could do with the UI and the UX. And we know there are plenty of bugs to be found and feature requests to be made. So whatever the role you have, we definitely look forward to your ability to help with the application. So thank you.
So, Tony, I was talking with a developer this morning who specializes in automation of the build tasks of code service automation. And he's like, can I actually mute yourself while I'm talking? Sorry, thank you. Yeah, we're just getting feedback. Maybe it's me. But we were just talking with him. I was talking with him this morning, and he's like, "Well, what are you guys using to stand up a new deployment?" And I said, "Well, you know, Tony or Bill goes and stands up a new slot in Azure, and then we tie it to backend and do the source control integration with GitHub or whatever." And he's like, "No. I can write his PowerShell script that'll automate all of that for you and deploy everything without having to touch anything. So you're just gonna drop the PowerShell, type one command in, and then boom, your site's launched in a new instance in Azure." So there's all kinds of different ways that people can help. Tony, what I'll get you to do is, if you don't mind, in a minute here, if I could get you just to share your screen and do a walkthrough of some of the basic principles of the site. But Bill, if you wouldn't mind giving some background just on the code-a-thons that we've had to date, and just kind of share a little bit about how we've gotten where we are with the code base.
Sure, I can do that. Can you add Jim McGowan to the Hangout, since he is still waiting for an invite? Jim at the Red Cross.
Can you just share? I did send it to him. Would you mind? You can add him as an invite, I think, if that's okay.
Okay.
Or you know what? I'll give it a try right now. I'll see what I can do. You go ahead and talk, and I'll try and get this going.
So what we've done so far is already has been worked on during the summer by the Visual Studio team as part of what they wanted to showcase as an application for what the Visual Studio 2015 tools were doing. Some of that is, I'm sure for most developers, you're tired of Northwind, Fabricam, and so on, all the way back to that. So this is a real application that really gets used, that showcases the tool. Since then, we started recruiting a number of other people, such as James, Brian, and Dave, starting to work on a push toward the Connect event in November. And I missed, by the way, talking about that conference. So we also had a 2-day event where Mike and some others joined us in the Wisconsin Dells at that conference. Got quite a bit done toward the open sourcing the project from the code base Microsoft gave us, and worked on putting that together. Then in the build up to Connect, we were working on staying with the ASP.NET team up to all the way up to RC1, which is what it's running on now, ASP.NET 5 RC1, and filling in a lot of the core scenarios that the Red Cross needed. And that work finished on a weekend code-a-thon after the MVP Summit, and you can see some of the footage for that on YouTube with the In the Code episodes. So where we're at now, Tony and Jim McGowan, who are trying to add, hopefully can talk about that, is we've had a pilot in Chicago. So some of the Red Cross people actually working with the software, giving us more feedback on what we got right, what we didn't get right, what they need, where there were scenarios that we didn't necessarily see before we started. And there we go. And that's pretty much where the code is now. And our main goal, as Tony said, is to keep this as not a event-based coding exercise, but rather for it to continue as a true open source project with people contributing pretty much on an ongoing basis as they have time, and continue to add features and continue to have it deployed with the different organizations in the field. And with that, James, we'll turn it back to you.
Okay, excellent. Mike, in a couple of minutes here, if you could pull up some stats for the GitHub repo, we'll talk about some of the work that's been done. One of the really cool things that we got to do is when we were in Seattle, we had members of the ASP.NET team come. And I got to tell you, I've been working on some open source stuff, and I've been working on some ASP.NET 5 stuff. It is a lot easier to troubleshoot when you have guys from the team actually in the room working on the code with you. So it was really cool, and it was just a really good way for Microsoft to show that they were really behind it as well, and they really supported the project. It was awesome to be a part of that. Tony, would you mind sharing your screen there, and we'll have a look at what some of the features of the website?
Yep, I will hopefully be clicking the right series of buttons to make that happen. Let me know when and if you can see my screen, and hopefully that works.
We can. It's not. We don't have a huge. We don't have great resolution on the projector here, but we can see the screen.
Okay. Yeah. I was also curious how my lovely 27-inch 4K monitor was going to translate. So, so this is the application, and this is we have it in testing right now, as James mentioned. And as I talked, I'm just going to walk through, and there's actually one of the videos from our most recent event has a walkthrough of this as well. So there's really two sides of the application, as I mentioned. From an administrator point of view, there is the ability to go in, and there's two levels of administrator: a site administration, or what historically in code's been referred to as God mode, right? Can do anything in the app. And then there's an organization level admin. So think of that as somewhere for the Red Cross or the Tonys Without Borders, or Humanitarian Toolbox, or whomever. And so as an admin at a site level, I can go in and I can do a number of things to users. I can also promote and define, what level users they are. And as a user comes in and signs in, which I'll show in a moment, with their own username and password, or through one of the social media accounts, I can then find them here and tag them to the right organization. And
Tony,
then there's.
Can you zoom in a little bit for us?
What's that?
Can you zoom in a little bit for us?
I will try.
Okay, that's a little better. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I wonder is this better?
It's not too different. That was okay when you were full out there. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
We'll
Here, it's mega zoom now. Okay, and so as I mentioned, there's a number of things we can do with users. So the primary vehicle, if you will, or entity in the application is the campaigns, and these are fake test data in here. But the idea of a campaign is something that's going to happen over time in a number of potential locations and on a number of potential days, or it can come down to happening on a single day. And again, as I mentioned, this is the test data that comes in by default. So obviously there's stuff missing here, but you'll see the idea is the campaign has a name, has dates, has information, and it's also got aspects that you can edit along all of here. We can provide sort of campaign impact goals. You could show that we've got a numeric impact and we've delivered so many out of 10,000 smoke detectors or whatever that is. And so ultimately that information turns into the landing page that someone would use when they're coming to volunteer. The other thing I want to note is that we sort of have a trail of entities a campaign is, again, either a day or many days and weeks. There can be individual activities underneath that, so those could be a single rally, going and handing out flyers at a grocery store, or installing smoke detectors for, a day or two in a certain location. And then underneath an activity, we have tasks. Tasks would be the discrete items that somebody's actually executing on. And so we have the ability to edit and do all that work, as well as we have the ability to, there's a jump-in thing, fix that text tag. We have the ability that if someone had volunteered for something at the activity level, as an admin I can go in here and can actually assign them to those tasks. So you can think of it as almost the minority report of taking users and tasks and assigning them and not doing that sort of on paper with erasers or inside of Excel or something like that. So those are organizations, campaigns. There's also skills that are associated with them, but quickly I'll show you the volunteer or the end user experience. So I'm going to sign in with my Microsoft account, and hopefully this will work quickly. Yep, it did. Yep.
And this is one of the things that's really important here, is because this application is about connecting. Ultimately, there's the super admin for the site to add new organizations and handle roles and things like that. But ultimately, this is about the experience between the organization who sets up these campaigns and all the tasks that need to be executed, and the volunteers who are going to actually be executing the tasks. So This is an important part on the other side.
And in fact, there's a few issues out there that are labeled jump in around. Right now, zip code search doesn't work, so we can remove that and just do a list of campaigns. But so I logged in as a volunteer, but I technically didn't have to. I could not be logged in as well and just be going as an anonymous user and see the campaigns that are out there, see that we have something that's happening over the course of a year, see that there are these activities, so I could say, hey, you know what, the data's a little weird because it's like, installing for 7 years, but I can go in and I can say, I see this activity, I can see some information. If there were skills required, it would provide that information, and I can go ahead and click and say I want to volunteer, and so then it would prompt me to log in if I wasn't logged in yet. That's a little funny that it bumps back there versus clicks the volunteer button, so there's another issue we can add. And basically, it's going to provide a small amount of form that's going to allow me to put in, defaulting to my contact info, for this activity I'm volunteering for, how do I want to be contacted, by email, by phone, as well as contents or comments. And I could also identify the skills. If they said, hey, we need someone who's good with a drill and maybe an electrician or somebody who's CPR certified, etc., I could self-identify which of those skills I have. And real quick, if I volunteer, I'm now volunteered for that, I can log off, I could jump over here as an administrator, and now I can hopefully remember which one of those campaigns it was that I, was it this one, I think? And I think it was this one, we'll find out in a moment. Yep. Good job, me. And so we can see that now we see there is a volunteer for this activity. I can message them, so I can send out what will be both an email and a text message. So I could tell everybody, actually, we're not doing it Saturday. It turns out it's Valentine's Day, so we're going to cancel it or whatever it is. As well as I can go into the tasks, as I talked about earlier, look at the volunteers, and then go ahead and say, you know what, yeah, I'm going to put Tony Surma on this first task here. And the other point about tasks is we can actually have multiple people on multiple tasks, because task 0 might be setup, task 4 might be cleanup, and then in between are other things. And I might say, hey, you know what, I'm going to assign Tony to task 0 and task 4. And then the day before, I can send a reminder or set the system to send a reminder. So it can say, hey, Tony, we're going to see you on the 3rd, and you've got work to do from 8 to 10 and 4 to 5 p.m. or something like that.
Right on. I think one of the really cool things, or one of the concepts in there that works really well, and I think it works for the organizations. And Jim, I'm going to get you to talk on this in a few minutes. But the idea that somebody can present their skills and say, I would like to volunteer for this activity, and then it leaves it up to whoever's administering the event to be able to choose which people with which skills go on to which tasks. And there's also some really cool opportunities for down the road for some development that we could do. For example, bridging the gap between selection, so saying these people would actually be really good candidates for this task because they have the skills that are required. So that's not a mandatory thing, but it's something that could really augment that experience. Yeah, I got a question here. Yeah.
So is there anything that's like a vaccine for something to go down
Oh, like, so one of the questions here that came in from our group here in Winnipeg is there a way to provide feedback about the way the volunteers executed a task or something like that? That's not in there today as far as I know, but Tony, any thoughts on what that might look like?
Yep, that's actually the kind of thing we want to add over time. One of our goals is to start getting the data, start getting the users, and then over time we can start to see trends that the admins could use as well as the users could use. So we could find out that, actually that Tony guy doesn't do a very good job when he volunteers. He keeps getting sort of, negative feedback, as well as he always doesn't show up. As well as we could start to do some of that skill-based mapping, and then some of the experience of the same kind of work, so that over time we can apply things like machine learning and data analytics, so that when you're doing that minority report, tying volunteers to tasks, you could say, hey, here's where it's located, here's where this person's located, here's how it's been going with them as a volunteer, here's their skill set, and I'm even kind of suggesting these are the folks you want on different tasks. So we definitely want to use that data over time to not only know who's doing well and not, but also assign volunteers that are most likely to actually show up and do the work and do a good job, as well as make sure that they're having a good experience. Because one of the things we learn again and again working with folks like Jim at the Red Cross is just like with you all who are volunteering here, the number one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to sort of waste anyone's time. We don't want someone to show up who can't do the job, or have someone show up who isn't going to have a great experience, because we want them to come back again and again.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Tony, thank you for that. Before we get into what the Red Cross, how the Red Cross is using it, and what they're doing, Jim, I'm going to get you to give us a background on your project. But I see, Mike, you're ready to go with the code there. Would you mind giving us a little bit of a breakdown? I'm going to need you to scroll in, zoom in a little bit as well, and I'm just going to grab the link here so we can get it tweeted out. But here we go. So yeah, Mike, go ahead, unmute yourself and kind of walk us through some of what's going on here. Zoom in a little bit for us. Yeah, there we go. That's a little better.
Is that okay?
Yeah. I wish I knew how to close this pane over here. I don't know what it is. Is it Q&A? There we go. That's a little better. Okay.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is just a history of commits. So this little bump back in August, that was the Code-a-thon at that conference. Because first of all, are you seeing what I'm seeing, and can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. We see it. It's faint. We're on a bad projector here, but we can see it. We can make it out. Everybody can make it out okay? Somewhat? A little bit? Okay, and we can hear you fine, Mike.
Okay, cool. So anyway, this was the Code-a-thon at that conference. It was a couple dozen people, a few commits, and then starting in September was kind of this push up to the post MVP summit Code-a-thon, which you can see was the reason for this big old spike. But then leading up to that, there was actually a decent amount of activity and commits on there as well. So obviously, people working on it, for 8 or 10 hours a day for a few days straight is going to generate a lot more activity than people just kind of plunking away on it in their free time. But it's not just a straight drop off after that. I mean, if you can look at even in the last week, we've still had some decent activity, some pull requests merged. And actually, there was still a decent amount of activity even after the Code-a-thon. It's tapered off a little bit, but I think everybody's got issues that they have assigned to them. So just talking a little bit about how to navigate issues. We largely organize issues into milestones. We can also assign issues to people. So in general, issues that don't have anybody assigned to them or don't have some kind of comment on them where somebody said, hey, I am actively working on this. Those are up for grabs.
we've got that green jump-in tag. So if you
Great.
haven't done ASP.NET 5 stuff before today, if you're not familiar with the Git tool or whatever, I'm here to help and walk you through that, and I can get you up to speed on that stuff. We can work on that today. You can grab one of those jump-in tags. If you want to try something a little bit more aggressive, maybe work with the database, write some commands and queries, modify some of the UI, there's priority 1, 2, and 3 tags in there as well. And we'll work through all of this afternoon. So there's not going to be a test at the end of this session here. Yes, George. From home, yeah, absolutely. That's right, and we'll go over all those processes this afternoon, but basically the question is how do I get involved after the event? And as Bill pointed out, we don't want this just to be a one-day, 10 people show up, and then we code for a couple of hours, and then nobody touches the project again. We want this to be a living, breathing thing where we're continuing to pull requests on a weekly basis. So absolutely, we want you to, and we're going to do it this afternoon, we want you to fork the code. We want you to create a feature branch where you're working on the thing, whatever you're taking off the list here, and then we're going to show you how to merge that back in and get going. And if you're already comfortable doing those things, and this will feel real natural. We're using the very close to the Git flow process and whatnot. So awesome. Okay.
You want me to just show off what that kind of looks like? I'm in the middle of a feature right now, and I can just sort of show what that looks like both in Git as well as on GitHub.
You know, Michael, we're going to have a different group possibly this afternoon. Maybe we'll connect here after this stand-up, and we can have you join this afternoon as well if that works.
And James?
Yes.
We've got a work in progress page that can help people that are new to Git and new to this workflow. I put it in the chat room for the Google Hangout, htbox.github.io. Should have instructions, and if anybody who's new tries that, and if they still are having issues, please write an issue on that repo, and then we'll address that and try to make that a really good way for people who are new to Git, new to GitHub, new to the way that we're working on the projects to become really familiar with those tools.
Absolutely, and one of the developers on the project, Dave Paquette, actually wrote a really detailed walkthrough on submitting the first pull request. So even if you're starting right from scratch on this, we've got all kinds of resources to get you plugged in. Awesome. Okay, we'll keep moving on here. We've got about 8 minutes left of this portion of the talk, and then we've got a few things to do afterwards. So I'll ask you, Jim, if you wouldn't mind joining us again here and unmuting yourself, and just give us a little bit of background about how you came to be involved in the project and how you guys are going to be using it out in the field.
Sure. So can you guys, I'm actually getting a pretty bad echo. But
I'll try and mute myself here.
That's all right, we'll just talk right through it. So we became involved, actually started working on another project. It's the first time I'd ever worked on anything that was open source, and saw how effective it could be, saw how it could engage volunteers. And so when this opportunity came about for us, we certainly jumped at it. It is not the typical way the Red Cross develops software, but I think we want to demonstrate that this is something that when you look at our mission, which is to empower volunteers and spend the donor dollar wisely, this kind of work so closely aligns with our mission that we want to demonstrate how effective it can be. One of the things I want to stress is that this is not a Red Cross application. This is not a tool that is being built solely for our use. And so what our hope is yes, we'll be the first user, but it's our intention to bring many other organizations in to share with this application, to share its use, with the idea that collectively using it, we're going to make cities like Chicago more resilient and less disaster prone. So that's kind of how we see the project. I want to always let people know how appreciative we are of the work that you're all doing. We're as fascinated with the application as we are with the process, and watching how this group comes together and puts this puts this tool together. And we're certainly learning a lot as we go along.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I really want to thank you guys for sticking with it past the technical difficulties this morning and jumping in and joining the call. It's awesome to have you guys speak into this as project sponsors and owners, and just to pass on your support to this group live as we go. Tony, did you have any closing remarks or anything that you wanted to add?
No, what I was going to say is just, again, thank you all for your time today. Hopefully selfishly, although it's not selfishly when you're building software for good. Selfishly, I hope that you continue to contribute after today. I purposely wore my Wolverine t-shirt, one of my favorite Canadian superheroes, and you guys are all using your technical superhero skills to help out with this application. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks again for joining everyone from all over the planet. It's really cool how this technology stuff all works the first try, hey? That was a joke.
All right, thank you.
That was sarcastic.
Always.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys. We're going to do some stuff here in the room, but we'll make sure we get some pics and everything, and you'll start seeing the commits fly this afternoon.
All right, thanks, guys. I'll
Thanks,
be here
everyone.
merging stuff.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.